Hey everybody, it's Pastor Greg. Happy holidays. It's so good to see you here in the month of December. Quick shout out to a few people. I want to shout out Lori and Ali in Detroit and Ariam in Virginia. We just want to thank you for your giving and for continuing to support CSC from remote locations. We love you, we see you, we appreciate you. We have a new message series this month, The Gift. We recognize that you are actually the gift to the earth. And so this month we're going to be talking about that. Today's message is what happens when we believe a lie. Let's get into the message. That feels good, doesn't it? That feels so good. Well, good morning, Celebration Spiritual Center.
Good morning.
How's everybody doing? Happy holidays, happy December. It's so good to see all your smiles. Missed you 1 week away and it feels like it was 10 weeks. OMG. Well, as Pastor Yolanda has already shared with us, our series, our topic this month, it's the gift. Recognizing that we give gifts regardless of what tradition you celebrate, gifts are given. But what I think is most important is that we are actually the ultimate gift, that we are the gift to the world. We are the gift to the universe. Joy to the world, for you have come. Let heaven and nature sing. So we're going to just dig right on in because I'm very excited about this message. I wanted to preach this message last Sunday. And so as I was thinking about this message, something came to my mind, and then a piece of news happened. Do we have any fans of The Wire? HBO's The Wire. Do we have any fans? Yeah, a few, right? The Wire is what's up. So HBO is actually going to be re-airing The Wire this month in HD, and then they're going to make it available on DVD for HD, which I'm kind of disappointed about because Pastor Yolanda gave me the whole series on DVD a few Christmases back, and so now I'm like, do I sell that one and buy the HD version? I don't know. But anyway, I'm very excited about The Wire. It's going to be shown in HD. And actually, when I was thinking about this message, it took me to The Wire. It actually took me to season 3, the last episode of season 3. The title of that episode was Mission Accomplished. And for those of you that don't know about The Wire, what was going on at that particular time, there was a war. There was a war between, a drug war between Avon Barksdale, his crew, and the new crew that was coming up, Marlo Stansfield, right? He was the new guy. He was very powerful. And they were warring over the drug corners, the prime real estate, right? And what happened in that season, Avon Barksdale's number 2, sort of like his partner in crime, his vice president, if you will, Stringer Bell, was killed. And so the Barksdale crew was very upset about this because this was Stringer Bell, this was one of their leaders, this was someone they looked up to, respected, and it was assumed that their rival, Marlo Stansfield, or one of his people, one of his lieutenants, had killed Stringer Bell. And so for that reason, they were ready to go to war. They said, Avon, let us know. What do you want us to do? We're ready to go. We'll get Marlo. We'll get his crew. We know where they are. And in that moment, Avon Barksdale has a private conversation with Slim Charles, which is one of the lieutenants. Love Slim Charles. And he has a conversation with him and basically tells him that actually Stringer Bell wasn't killed by Marlo's people. Like, that's not actually what happened. It was something else. It was a situation that I couldn't control. And so actually it has nothing to do with Marlo Stansfield. And he's feeling really regretful about this war that they had started. He's like, Stringer Bell was right. We should have never even started this war. We should have focused on getting out of the drug game, moving our money into things that were legal so that we would no longer have to deal with these kind of problems because people are being killed and now it's gotten out of control. And so in that moment, Slim Charles says this. He says, don't matter who did what to who at this point. Fact is, we went to war and now there ain't going back. I mean, it's war, Once you in it, you in it. If it's a lie, then we fight on that lie, but we gotta fight. If it's a lie, we fight on that lie. Even though it's like right now, yeah, I get it. It wasn't true. But even though it wasn't true, we've already started this ball rolling and we have to fight on the lie. And that's very disturbing to me when I think about it because, when the truth comes forward, you would think that, well, now let's live from the truth. Now, what's interesting about this episode and what I love about The Wire and what I love about David Simon, who is the creator of The Wire, this season mirrored what took place under George Bush's presidency and the lead up to the Iraq War. And so even the title of that episode, Mission Accomplished, was a wink and a nod to the fact when George Bush stood there with the big sign saying Mission Accomplished and the war was over. And we all know now, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that that war was fought on a lie. Yes, yes? Yes, yes. And so I love that about The Wire. And again, it brings us to the same point that we can't continue to fight on the lie. We've continued to perpetuate that war, that the Iraq war, Afghanistan is continuing to go on because of the lie. It's like, well, it doesn't matter if it was a lie. We're there now. We got to keep going forward. And that just has always bothered me. And so as we're talking this month about being the gift, recognizing who and what we are, I believe that there's a lie that each and every one of us have been presented with, and many of us have chosen to believe. Many of us have, just like Slim Charles said, oh, well, it's a lie, but we got to fight on that lie. Yes, it's not true, but this is what everybody is doing, so we have to live according to that lie. Now, in the news, of course, we are all very aware of what's been going on. We've had two very disturbing grand jury announcements in the past 2 weeks. Yes, yes? Ferguson and Staten Island, Michael Brown, Eric Garner. And as I think about that, and I think about this idea of believing a lie, I ask myself the question, well, why are so many people angry? Why are so many people upset? Why are so many people fearful, worried, dismayed, devastated? Now, what we know to be true, and we've talked about many times, is that our emotions are beautiful things. Our emotions are actually our communication with the divine within us. But what are our emotions telling us? Like when we're angry, when we're upset, when we're worried, what is it actually telling us? And if you study the teachings of Abraham Hicks, you'll know that what our emotions are actually telling us when we feel bad, when we feel negative emotion, when something doesn't feel good, it means that we're not in alignment with what God knows to be true or the source knows to be true about you or your life. That's why it doesn't feel good. It means that we may be experiencing or believing a lie when we don't feel good. So the question becomes, what if all of these things that we've been feeling, the reasons that we've been so upset and so dismayed and devastated and worried and fearful and scared for our sons and scared for our daughters, and we don't know if we can trust police, what if it's because we've actually believed a lie? And if we believed a lie, then we have to know what is that lie and then what is the truth. So I'll talk about it for a minute. What is the lie? From a spiritual, from a metaphysical place, what is the lie? The lie is that all you are is a physical being. It's not true. The lie is that a person, institution, organization, a research project or study, a government or authority can tell you who you are. The lie is that there is a source of evil. Interesting. It's interesting when we think about evil, right? Because, there's these thoughts about the devil. The devil's a creation. It doesn't exist. The devil is not real. It's a character from a story, right? But what's interesting about that, we think about the devil and we think about evil and we associate that with darkness. Can anybody tell me where the dark switch is? When do we turn on darkness? Darkness is the absence of light. So darkness has no source. There is no source of evil. There is no source of darkness. It's the absence of light. So in and when we are experiencing darkness, if and when we are experiencing evil, that means it's time to turn on light. Yes, yes?
Yes, yes.
Oh my goodness. What is the lie? The lie is that something external to you can hurt or harm you in truth. Yes, we know there are dangerous things in the world. Yes, we know we can be cut. Our physical being can be hurt or harmed. But again, your physical being is not all that you are. It's the smallest part of who you are. Your divine, your holy, eternal self has been and will continue to be forever and ever. And when we understand that, when we just embrace that idea just for a second, it can alleviate and eliminate these fears that we have around our temporal existence. But then the question comes, well, if those are the lies, what is the truth? The truth is that you're good, that you are worthy just by virtue of being here. The truth is that you are safe. The truth is that you are protected. The truth is that you are loved immeasurably. The truth is that you are eternal being. And here's the one I really love. The truth is that you are sinless. There's been this story that's gone around for years and years and centuries and misinterpreted that something happened, Adam and Eve caused all of this for all of us, right? We've talked about it many times. First of all, if you go to Scripture, if you go to the Bible, there are two creation stories. And in the first one, there is no fall. In the first one, God creates all of the things, and then God creates mankind and says, it is good. End of story. Now, in the second story, which is a symbolic story, which is a much later story, we have the situation with Adam and Eve. But it was a story to try to explain our existence, not from the standpoint that there's something wrong with us, but to actually introduce this idea of duality. Remember, eating of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil would make them like God, would make them all-knowing. We recognize that we live in a world of duality, of good and evil, of up and down, of this and that, of contrast. And then this is why we have choice. And it's from that choice that we get to create. Oh my God, that's what's exciting, right? Because we have experiences of things that, oh, I really didn't like this date. There were some things I liked, things I didn't. And so now I take the things that I like and I focus on those and I can create. But that's what that story was about. That story, and I've preached other messages and we could talk more about all of the symbolism, Adam and Eve representing the male and female aspect within us, representing Mars and Venus. There's so much that goes on with that story. But it's not about you're wrong. It's not about you're sinful, and so because you're sinful, God had to go through all of these people and generations to create Jesus, and Jesus had to be put on the cross to die for our sins as the perfect lamb. That's not what it's about. And it's interesting because then we look at the Jesus story, and Jesus was pointing us back to ourselves. Jesus said, "You are the light of the world. A city set upon a hill cannot be hid." But then the hymns of the church sing, Jesus is the light of the world. Walk in the light, beautiful light. Come where the dewdrops of mercy shine bright. Shine all around us by day and by night. Jesus, the light of the world. But Jesus said, you are the light of the world. So it was never about worshiping some man and putting him up in our stead to sacrifice for us. We don't believe in that, right? Sacrifice is not necessary. I preached that message. Please go back to it, right? But we have, we've learned to have this Jesus complex, that we have to put ourselves up on the cross for the rest of the world. No, that's not what it's about. You're sinless. So what happens when we believe a lie? I was reminded, because I recognize that these truths can be pretty hard to embrace sometimes, particularly when we see what's going on out in the world. I believe that if Eric Garner, if Michael Brown, if the police officers believed these things about themselves, they would have never been in the situation or created those situations. It's impossible. Because what I know to be true, in those situations, we were watching fear interacting with fear. We weren't watching some, institutionalized racism and all of these years of this and that and the other. That really had nothing to do with it. We were watching fear interacting with fear. That's what happens. And it's ugly, and it's not pretty, and it doesn't feel good. That's true, because fear is not the truth of us, right? We are fearless. We were created in fearlessness, and we are designed to live without fear. And so when we see fearful acts happen, it doesn't feel good, and it plays out in such an ugly way. A Course in Miracles teaches us that every act of fear is a call for love. Just like I said, there's no dark switch. If we experience darkness, we turn on the light because there's no source of darkness. And I love A Course in Miracles. I think it speaks to this so well. Now, the foundation of A Course in Miracles, and I see, those that are in Pastor Yolanda's class. Shout out to Katia. I see y'all. You know this already, right? The summation of the Course, if you don't read anything else, if you sit with this idea long enough, it'll change your life. Nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists. Herein lies the peace of God. That's the truth. Anything other than this is a lie. The idea that you can be threatened, right? That's a lie. Nothing real can be threatened. But then we have to understand who and what we are in terms of being real. Yes, this soul clothing is temporary. You're going to give up this body at some point. It's temporary. So yes, that can be threatened, if we want to use that word, right? We know that these bodies will wither and die. But what's real? It's the you. When you say your name in your head right now, that's what's real. That's the you. That's the eternal you. When you hear that I am within you, that's the real you. That can't be threatened. And then what's deep is nothing unreal exists. Actually, the real part of you, the eternal part of you, is the only part that actually is real because it exists from time to time to time to time, from beginning to end, always. And that's where the peace of God lies. When we embrace that, then that's when we can find peace, even in these difficult times, these difficult moments, right? When people are feeling so upset and feeling frustrated and feeling hopeless and angry. And what this means is when we're thinking about this idea of what happens when we believe a lie and we have to actually let go of the lie and embrace the truth, what A Course in Miracles is offering us, it's actually mind training in the sense that we have to unlearn all of these things, all of these beliefs that we have held, we have to unlearn them. And I love the first 7 lessons of A Course in Miracles. I invite everyone to just kind of sit with these lessons for a while. And I'm just going to read them to you, and they're radical. I remember the first time I encountered these lessons, I just shook my head, honestly. But the first 7 lessons, it says this. Number 1, nothing I see means anything. Deep, right? See, because, we hear about a grand jury choosing not to indict these officers, and we've applied meaning to it. And what's interesting, because we've believed the lie, the meaning that we apply to it, in my case, well, as a black man, I'm not safe. Nothing I see means anything, right? Because as soon as I choose to apply that meaning to it, then I move into fear, right? Then all of a sudden I feel helpless. Then all of a sudden I'm afraid to go outside. Then all of a sudden, as soon as a cop comes by, I'm looking around and scared, and right? And then, of course, as I move into that fearful place, I must attract fearful experiences, right? The next lesson says this: I have given everything I see all the meaning it has. I've chosen that meaning. No one can tell me what anything means except I choose, embrace, and decide it and put it on like a brand new suit. Nobody can do that. I make that choice. And so it's interesting, we do not have to accept the prevailing belief, accept the lie that because this has happened, because there were not indictments, that now all black men are not safe, that nobody's life matters, that all of a sudden we should be fearful of the police. We don't have to embrace that belief. What if that's a lie? Lesson 3, I do not understand anything I see. Why? Because from birth, we've been taught, we've been given all of these beliefs about what certain things mean, right? I think about Eric Garner or Michael Brown, right? And from this perspective of I do not understand anything I see, I know that those brothers were already given a story about being fearful of the police from a very young age. And yes, they may have seen things happen, and they chose to make that the truth of their life. They chose to make that their belief. And so then that is why we attract these experiences. Lesson 4, these thoughts do not mean anything. They are like what I see. Lord, have mercy. Okay, now we just talked about what we see. Nothing I see means anything, and we recognize why. But even the thoughts in your head, why? Because our thoughts create what we see. Yes. Lord, have mercy. These thoughts do not mean anything. They are like what I see. Now this lesson 5, it's one of my favorite lessons. I go to it so often, and it's perfect for this moment. I am never upset for the reason I think. Right? Because usually, if somebody walked up to me and cussed me out, I think that I'm upset because they cussed me out, right? Which now I've given them power. I've said, you, person who cussed me out, have so much power in my life that you can make me feel bad. Which is absolutely not true, right? Except I believe that, right? But the reason I think, what I recognize and we understand that if our emotions are indicators and I'm feeling bad or upset or I'm feeling accused or angry in any way, I recognize that this is a conversation with myself. And so if I'm attracting a stranger just running up to me and cussing me out, I need to look within and understand what's going on within. What and where am I vibrating? Where are my thoughts and beliefs? What lie have I believed? Because what I know to be true is that I could walk throughout the world and throughout the earth and just receive smiles and compliments and good mornings and how do you do's? And oh, that's a nice shirt you're wearing. I mean, that could be my experience as well. What am I believing? What lie have I chosen to believe? And then lesson 6, I see only the past. And see, this is what's interesting about this moment that we're in now, because if we allowed these moments to just be as they are, right? I've heard so many people say, even as the events in Ferguson first began, is this 1964 or is this 2014? I've heard people, they pulling back up Emmett Till, right? I see only the past. We're viewing these events through the lens of the past, which means we're not actually seeing what's going on now. We're thinking that, oh my God, we're back in 1963, and oh my God, all of these things happened in this year and that year. But what is happening now? What is happening now is about what we are believing to be true collectively, the lie that we've believed collectively. And I think it's important now to talk about a principle that we talk about often. The Kabbalion talks about the principle of cause and effect. It says this: every cause has its effect. Every effect has its cause. Everything happens according to law. Chance is but a name for law not recognized. There are many planes of causation, but nothing escapes the law. This principle embodies the fact that there is a cause for every effect and effect for every cause. It explains that everything happens according to law, that nothing merely happens, that there is no such thing as chance, that while there are various planes of cause and effect, the higher dominating lower planes, still nothing ever entirely escapes the law. And I think that's important because we're talking about metaphysical, spiritual principle, right? Understanding that nothing that happens is random. We may not understand it. Many people think luck exists. Like there is no such thing as luck. There's cause and effect. Always. We may not understand what the cause is at the time. But when we recognize and we start to take this principle and we say, well, if there's always cause and effect, then what are the causes that's going on? And what I want to offer as we're in this moment, this conversation around what's happened in Staten Island and what happened in Ferguson, racism is the big buzzword, right? This is what we're talking about. Racism is still alive. Racism is an effect. It's not a cause. Let's sit with that for a minute. We think that racism is the cause for why Michael Brown and Eric Garner are no longer here. Racism is an effect. It's an effect of the lie that we've believed. Right? Now, racism is rooted in a belief of separation, in a belief that we're not actually one, right? But science teaches us, if we look at our DNA, we are more alike than we are different. The things that make us look different are minute compared to all that makes us the same. That's science, right? But then we look out in the world, we look at the diversity in the world. That is the very nature of life itself. Flowers, there are all different varieties of flowers. Planets, there are all different varieties of planets. Stars, there are all different varieties of stars. Moons, there are all different varieties of moons. Right? We recognize that diversity is a key part of life, and that's what makes life interesting. I was thinking about this morning as I was getting dressed. Like, imagine how boring life would be if there was only one cuisine. When I eat Thai food, I'm thankful and grateful for all of the people from Thailand that had certain spices and vegetables and peppers that didn't exist anywhere except in that place, and they created these wonderful foods. And then if I eat a West African dish, I'm grateful for that dish. And when I eat Chinese food, I'm grateful for that dish. And of course, as an American, I'm grateful for all of the crazy American dishes that we have, even a Krispy Kreme cheeseburger. Right? It's diversity. It's what life requires it. And we see it everywhere, but somehow it's different when it comes to race. Now, the other part, when I say racism is not a cause, it's an effect. We know, and it's really easy to just do a little research, race is a construct. It was created, right? It was created for a purpose, and I don't want to get into conspiracy theories. I don't live in that world, but I recognize that it was created for a purpose, that it has always been known that there's only one race, There's only humanity. There's only the human race. So anytime that we make racism an institution, anytime that we bring racism into the conversation as though it was the cause of this, we have actually believed the lie. We have now embraced the very lie that was created to separate us all. Right? If you look at the story of what happened in Rwanda, right? Again, that was based on separation. Everybody looks the same to me. I mean, it's fascinating. I don't know, there was a difference supposedly with noses or something. But I can't tell the difference between one Rwandan for another, Hutu and the Tutsi, right? But the Belgians, they created separation, and that creation of separation is what created the genocide that we experience in Rwanda. It always will create something very ugly, right? Because it's not the truth. When we believe the lie, we will get ugly results over and over again. But when we believe the truth, we move into unity. When we believe the truth, we move into balance. When we believe the truth, we move into harmony. When we believe in the truth, we move into unconditional love. When we believe the truth, we have the world that we desire, the world that Dr. King called the beloved community. That's what happens when we believe the truth. And it's interesting because, if we choose to believe this idea of racism, if we choose to believe that that is the cause, what I also recognize is that you cannot be a victim and a victor at the same time. Oh my God. It's impossible. It's just impossible. It's wonderful. I've lived in the victim story. I've marched. I've blamed racism for all of those things. I've done all of those things. I'm over it. I recognize that I cannot be a victim and a victor at the same time. I cannot be a winner and a loser at the same time. They live in two different places. I'm choosing to win. I'm choosing to be victorious, right? I'm choosing to experience love unconditional and peace with all of my brothers and sisters, right? And so just last night, I received an invite. I know that there are several marches happening on December 13th. A lot of people are going to be marching in D.C. There's going to be marchers here in New York. And they want millions to march. And what struck me in this particular invite that I got, it was a beautifully designed cover photo. And it starts with a day of anger. Millions march. And I laughed. I said, I'll go to a day of peace, a day of unity, a day of harmony. I'm not going to a day of anger. Now, why do I say that? Now, first, we know all emotions are good. All emotions are indicators. So anger in and of itself is not bad, right? Anger is a necessary emotion, but anger is not necessarily constructive, right? When we use anger to act, generally it's destructive. When we create from anger, we usually get unintended results. Right? But we recognize that anger is important because anger can be a sense of relief if we've been in depression, if we've been in apathy, right? If we just felt like I don't matter and I'm worthless. You get angry when you realize that all this time I thought I didn't matter and I was worthless. All this time I believed the lie. You get angry. But then you use that fuel to move further up the emotional scale. And so I was reminded of a book that I love, Power versus Force, David Hawkins. And he talks about anger this way. What I believe is that collectively we've kind of been teeter-tottering between anger and pride. Pride is just above anger, and I've talked about this, the message we did this summer, Bless You Fear. It was based on the movie Frozen. And what's interesting in Frozen, Elsa, she has this wonderful ability, but because of her fear, she created this ugly, jagged castle, and she hurt people because she was in this place of fear around her gift. Once she moved into the place of love and unity, her same gift became a beautiful thing. So we recognize that it was the anger and fear, that was the only thing that made her gift wrong or bad. And so I believe that we've continued to move teeter-totter through anger and pride. And David Hawkins writes this about anger. He says, as people move out of apathy and grief, which I talked about, to overcome fear as a way of life, they begin to want. Desire leads to frustration, which in turn leads to anger. Thus, anger can be a fulcrum by which the oppressed are eventually catapulted to freedom. Fury over social injustice, victimization, and inequality has created great movements that led to major changes in the structure of society. But anger expresses itself most often as resentment and revenge, and is therefore volatile and dangerous. Anger leads easily to hatred, which has caused an erosive effect on all areas of a person's life. And so we move from anger, we move up to the level of pride. But what does he say about pride? Pride is divisive and gives rise to factionalism. The consequences are costly. The downside of pride is arrogance and denial. These characteristics block growth. In pride, recovery from addictions is impossible because emotional problems or character defects are denied. The whole problem of denial is one of pride. Thus, pride is a very sizable block to the acquisition of real power, which displaces pride with true stature and prestige. And so according to the scale that David Hawkins has, we move from anger to pride to then what he labels level 200, which is where we want to start. And level 200 is the level of courage, right? And I love the level of courage. He says this about it. At the level of courage, an attainment of true power occurs. Therefore, it is also the level of empowerment. Courage implies the willingness to try new things and to deal with the changes and challenges of life. People at this level put back into the world as much energy as they take. At lower levels, populations as well as individuals drain energy from society without reciprocating because accomplishments result in positive feedback, self-reward, and self-esteem become progressively self-reinforcing. This is where productivity begins. The level of courage. I love to think about this because what I recognize is what we're talking about, as David Hawkins says, is that the willingness to try new things. I recognize we've marched. We've protested. We've done all of those things, and it reminds me of something that Joseph Campbell says. He says that the virtues of our past become the vices of our present, right? And so it's recognizing I love, I honor our ancestors. Trust me, I've done my work. I've done my research. I understand it all. I honor all the work that is done. But if we continue to make and look to that nostalgic time as this is what we're supposed to do now, all that they did brought us to where we are now. Pastor Yolanda and I were talking about it. I realized the life that I live, the life that I enjoy, I could not live or enjoy without the things that my ancestors did. Praise God for them, right? But I recognize that where we want to go is where they could not or did not know to go. We know more now. We are required to do what we now know to do, right? And so it's not about protesting and marching unless it's an inspired idea or unless we know that we're moving and operating from a place of love. But a day of anger is not that, right? And then we talk about the idea that if we're pushing against what we don't want, we're going to continue to keep that in our space. So the tagline for the march in Washington is a march against police brutality. Well, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. You've ensured that police brutality will continue. You can't march against, if you push against what you don't want, it's going to continue to be there. A Course in Miracles talks about unforgiveness in a similar way. That as long as you hold a person, hold what they did wrong, and we hold them in unforgiveness, you're their jailer. In order for them to stay in the jail and in the prison, you got to be sitting there like you ain't getting out. Right? Which means you're sitting there in that space with the person that you don't want, that you don't like, or that did something wrong to you. But when you forgive them, they're free and you're free. And that's what's beautiful because you got to both be free. This is, I talked earlier about we're sinless. We have to all be free or nobody's free. We have to all be sinless or nobody's sinless. And this is where that Adam and Eve story gets us tripped up, right? And even creates the very idea of separation. I'm saved, you ain't. I'm holy, you ain't. All of that stuff, right? But we recognize that we want and we must do something different. And what's interesting, this level of courage, this is just the beginning. But I recognize that it takes courage to forgive, right? It takes courage to still see our police officers as loving in spite of what took place. It takes courage to say, okay, maybe it's time for us to do something different. Maybe it's time for us to look at this different because this keeps happening over and over and over again. And we keep responding in the same way over and over again. It takes courage to say, maybe we don't know what we need to do. It takes courage to stop, breathe, and forgive, as Erykah Badu posted this week on Facebook. We need to stop, breathe, and forgive, right? It takes courage to do that. It takes courage to say, you know what, I don't know what to do right now, and I know I'm angry. Let me move through this anger so that I can move and hear the inspired idea, hear where my inner being is actually asking me to move to. That takes courage. And that's the level we want to move to. What's beautiful, once we begin to operate in that level of courage, then we move to the level of neutrality, willingness, acceptance, reason, love, joy, peace, and then enlightenment. But just if we started operating in the level of courage, what's beautiful, again, as David Hawkins says, at this level, people give back to the world as much as they take. And there's a sense of accomplishment. There's a sense of self. There's a sense of self-worth that is not based on factionalism, but it's based on the truth rather than the lie. In closing, I was reminded this week of a song that I love, and we almost sang today, but my voice is not where it needs to be. I'm at the tail end of a cold. And but I listened to the song because it just comforted me. It's a song by a brother, Kahari Lemuel, Love Has Spoken. And we've sung it here a few times. And it's written from the place of love speaking to us almost, in a very emphatic, almost scolding tone, to remind us, to kind of shake us out of this belief in the lie. And it says this, it says, stop walking around unprepared. Stop being scared. Stop doing all the crazy things you do. That ain't you. Stop wasting precious time you have complaining about your circumstance, believing that you're what you're going through. That ain't you. This is exactly what we're doing. We believe that we're what we're going through. When people heard that there would not be an indictment in the Eric Garner case, when people heard that there would not be an indictment in the Michael Brown case, we believed that was us. We believed that we were what we were going through. That ain't you. Don't you remember who you are? Don't you remember? And even after all this time, please tell me why you don't know what you're here to do. Did you know that when I made you, you were pure love? Yes. Did you know that when I made you, you were whole? Did you know that you were born of pure divinity, a true mystery to unfold? Love has spoken, love eternal, love unending, love unbroken. Love is always speaking these same words to us. But in order to hear the voice of love, we have to stop listening to the voice of the lie. In order to hear the voice of love, we can no longer believe that lie. On that, I invite everybody to stand. And I recognize that this is a radical message. I recognize that this is not what everybody's saying. But I recognize that insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, and that's what we've seen in this country, continuing to react actually, in the same way over and over again. It's time to move to the level of courage and do something different, to be willing to try something different. When the events of Ferguson first began in August, I talked about the Transcendental Meditation Movement, who went to D.C. and lowered the murder rate just by meditating. Nothing else. There was no marches. There was no day of anger. But all of a sudden, people stopped killing each other. All of a sudden, people got along with the cops. All of a sudden, the blacks and the Koreans were able to move along together and live together and work together. But all they did was meditate. It is time, I believe, to bring spiritual solutions to these problems because they're spiritual. The level of cause is in the level that we cannot see. It's in that realm that it's time for us to move to. Because we've done all that we can in the physical world, and still it is the same story over and over again. And so I am making a declaration today that I'm going to do something different. I don't know what I'm going to do on December 13th, but I'm interested in bringing some people together in a day of unity, in a day of togetherness, in a day of love, recognizing that we love our police officers just as we love our brothers Eric Garner and Michael Brown and their families, because we recognize that we're one, and until we get that, we're going to constantly be moved and motivated by the lie. So, Mother, Father, God, in this moment, we come remembering who and what we are. We send love to everyone in this country and on planet Earth because we realize there's like a disturbance happening, right? But what I recognize is that disturbance is really an awakening. That we are being called to remember the truth. That we are being called to go back to what is absolutely true, that we are eternal, that we are sinless, that we are fearless, that we are good, that we are worthy, that we have done nothing wrong. That we actually cannot be threatened, hurt, or harmed in totality, in truth. And we recognize that as we begin to look to that truth, as we begin to embrace that truth, as we begin to make that truth the truth of our lives, our choices become different. We no longer choose from the place of fear. We no longer choose from the place of doubt and worry and limitation. We are unlimited beings, creators. And we recognize that because you, the universe, the all, the intelligent mind, respects us as creators, whatever we believe to be true, so it is. And so that belief that we have believed for so long that racism is the cause, we let go of that belief. And we come back to the truth and hold the belief of our unity, which even our science backs up, that we are more alike than we are different. That as we move and choose to operate from the place of love, our lives must change. And you, the universe, the intelligent mind, say to us over and over again, and so it is. You say to us over and over again, yes and amen. For we recognize that you don't understand no. Whatever we push against, whatever we include, you include. So we are choosing to put our attention on that which we are wanting to see. We choose to put our attention on all that we want, to the exclusion and the elimination of what we don't want, so that we can create a world that our teachers and our prophets and our masters and wonderful spiritual men and women have talked about over and over again. We know that the beloved community is real. It's a real idea that exists. We are choosing to bring it forward through our very lives and our very existence. Even in this generation, it is possible. And we stand in possibility today. For this, we are so very grateful. We release these words back into you, back into cause. And to it, we say, amen. Ashe. And so it is. So it is. Thank you, God.